Good morning. So I'm joined by Julie
Morning.
this morning. Julie Davidson has joined us. Julie, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here, Suzie.
Excellent. So I'll give a brief intro. We've got some super questions to go through. So to give a context for everybody listening, FTSE 100 CMO, really impressive career. You've worked with some amazing brands throughout the 30 years of your marketing career, primarily consumer facing, obviously more recently senior interim roles, but you've got retail, FMCG, financial services. So I think what we'll do is we'll before we dive into the questions, would you mind just giving a bit more insight into your background, and then we'll have a chat through our questions.
Of course, happy to. So yeah, as you said, Suzie, I've been in marketing for well over 30 years now. Time flies. Half my career is really with blue chip FMCG businesses. So started out with Cadbury Schweppes for nearly 12 years and then L'Oreal. And then the second half, really a combination of omnichannel retail with people like Levi Strauss, L'Oreal and Boots, and then into direct-to-consumer e-commerce businesses like Experian, lastminute.com, Weight Watchers, etc. And then, as you said, most recently, well, I say recently, it's probably been nearly 10 years of working in interim and fractional CMO roles, as well as a bit of consultancy and advisory work for scale-up SMEs and startups.
Oh, what led you into marketing, or what led you into a career in marketing in the first place?
I studied management and administration at Aston, so that's a long while ago, and actually specialised in marketing. And I loved the consumer psychology. And I think what's kept me in marketing has been that combination of strategic, creative, and commerciality in a role. But actually, really, it's the fact that marketing doesn't stand still. So when I think about, marketing in the 90s, so much has changed, whether it be, the consumer behavior side of things, whether it be routes to market, whether it be the proliferation of communication channels or technology, which obviously we all know has made a huge impact on, how marketing is done today. So all of those things mean that you're constantly learning and growing in a marketing career, which I love. And able to feel that you are in a dynamic profession, I think is really important.
Is that what has held your interest for all this time?
Yes, that's definitely what's held my interest, as well as the fact that I've worked across multiple sectors, which I know we'll talk a bit about. So for me, I'm constantly able to apply parallels from different industries and able to learn about how marketing operates in different industries as well. I mean, I think one thing I would say as well, I feel as though marketing's coming a bit full circle at the moment. There's a lot of talk about marketing being more commercial. And actually in the 90s at Cadbury, and I think it was the same in a lot of blue chip FMCG companies, marketing owned the P&L. So the marketing manager, you had that broad commercial perspective from day one. And I've taken that with me through my career, but I have seen, having worked across non-FMCG categories where marketing is sometimes seen as communications. That seems to be changing again now, with a real focus on marketing delivering a return and marketeers and CMOs being commercial, broad leaders who really understand the impact across the business. And I think that's crucial.
By just giving a bit of an insight to everyone listening into your career path, because I know you started with sort of Cadbury's FMCG in the earlier days, but you've made some very smart moves through different sectors, and I know that will be interesting to people as to how you've made those moves, and then we'll talk a bit more about what you've done in more recent years.
Of course. Yes. So as I said, kind of 15 years across Cadbury and L'Oreal, which was really my blue chip grounding in all things brand marketing. And then I moved to Levi Strauss, which was at the time very much bricks and mortar retail. So that was a completely new experience for me, and enabled me to then, with my Boots hat on, be able to take that into an organization with a much broader network of stores and a really important retailer in the UK. Then moving into e-commerce, so lastminute.com, I was there when the business was 10 years old, and it was going through a lot of change. Having been a complete pioneer in e-commerce, was really being challenged on all sides by new competition, and really needed to transform. So that was probably one of my first transformation type roles. And then from there into businesses like Weight Watchers, which again was very much omnichannel, so growing online business, as well as having their traditional, direct sort of physical meetings business, and a real sort of cultural transformation there as well, in terms of that shift from cottage industry, community business into online and digital. So that was kind of the shift across FMCG, bricks and mortar retail, and then e-commerce. And that sort of expanded as I've then moved into other interim roles with people like Experian, and so on.
You worked with some great brands at very exciting points in their business models there, didn't you? And then obviously more recently, the last 10 years, doing sort of big interim, and obviously with the focus on the transformational element. What appeals to you, because there'll be lots of people listening who are considering interim, what appeals to you about doing these very big interim and transformation roles?
I think I thrive on change, transformation, growth agendas, and the variety of interim. So I started my interim career actually when I left Boots, and I was re-employed on a consultancy contract by the global division of Boots. I'd been leading Number 7, Sultan and Botanics across the UK. And I was re-employed by the global team specifically to launch Number 7 in Finland as a bit of a test of, could Number 7 be an FMCG brand outside of Boots? Yeah. And that was a fabulous strategic project, and it gave me a real opportunity to operate in a more sort of independent way. And really drive a sort of transformation agenda. So that whetted my appetite, I think, for it. And then, I've had numerous projects with people like Jordan's, Dorset with Ryvita, Haagen-Dazs, which was a big business transformation agenda. And then more recently, as you said, in financial services. For me, interim and fractional roles are often focused on, a big transformational growth agenda for the business, where there's often a need to drive that change at pace, obviously with cultural sensitivity as well, because every organisation is different. And I really relish and thrive on that. I think I'm good now at getting underneath the skin of what's working and what's not working really quickly, and being able to, put forward that strategy for change and that growth direction, and the roadmap to delivering it. Sometimes I end up being there and implementing part or all of that roadmap. Sometimes, it's really about the recommendations. But either way, I love that. As I said, I really thrive on the variety. I've worked with scale-ups like pitchup.com and the outdoor escapes space, with SMEs like Talking Talent. They're looking to expand globally, through to blue chip, FTSE 100 organisations, as I've said, like Aberdeen, M&G Wealth recently, Haagen-Dazs, with bigger sort of longer transformation journeys. So a real mix of experience and opportunity.
Well, you certainly have a real natural affinity and skill for kind of managing these big change and transformation projects. And a lot of that is about how you lead your teams. And I'm really curious as to what your style or technique is in terms of, how, because you're going into these businesses and you're doing an amazing job. So how do you lead the teams through these projects?
Yeah, for me, it's really about building rapport and trust really quickly. So one of the key things I always do is spend the first few weeks listening, meeting as many people as possible, absorbing as much as I can about the business, what's working, what isn't working, and I find that, by doing that, it allows me to make sure I'm building that rapport and trust quickly. It's quite easy sometimes when you've worked across so many businesses for so long to jump into, oh, I know what needs to be done here. So I have to, force myself not to leap into that and to really kind of build a network. And linked to that, I think it's also important once you have the vision and direction to get to get as many people on board with that as possible. So really selling that vision, making people want to be part of the change, and obviously that applies not just in interim, it applies in any CMO or leadership role. But I've particularly found it's important to find out who are the people who really are eager for the change and want to be part of it. There are always people who, once they get to know you, come forward and say, I'd like to be part of this. So at Haagen-Dazs, for example, which was a business transformation brief that I was leading, I formed a team that was cross-functional, and actually the change agenda became viewed as a business change, not marketing, because sometimes, obviously, if it's viewed as marketing leading it, it's then harder to get the pace and the buy-in. So I think it's really, really important that everybody in the business, not just the marketing organization, are really bought into that change. And then I think the last thing for me that's really important is making sure there's buy-in from the top, from the board, from the CEO. A good example of that for me was when I was CMO at London Business School. I went in on an interim basis and ended up staying nearly 4 years as CMO because there was so much transformation to be done. But in my early months, it was obvious that there needed to be a full global brand relaunch. The CEO really understood that, but the wider management board didn't. So I had to take the time to really engage them in the burning platform. That paid dividends. So I think, it's that combination of having a dose of humility in the beginning. Particularly for me, I've gone into sectors that I knew nothing about, like wealth management, and it's really important to, not bulldoze your way into driving the change.
Oh, thank you. And there's certainly be a number of people listening who are either considering going into interim or might be about to embark upon their first sort of interim role. Is there any other guidance that you would give, having now done this for a while, how to approach these roles? Any guidance or advice that you would share that might benefit people who are, going to be embarking on their first big interim role?
Yeah. I think, a couple of points. I think one, be really clear on, your sort of value proposition, what you're really great at, how you add value, and then think about the time you've got. So if it's 6 months, for example, you almost need to condense that normal process of, the 90-day induction into, an espresso version. And I would say definitely do, have some standard questions that you ask up front. Make sure you're meeting as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Listen and absorb as much either before you start or, in your first couple of weeks. So you can, reach your conclusions and lay out a vision and a roadmap quickly. I've always found it super helpful to have that roadmap for the 6 months and be really clear about, on a fortnightly or even weekly basis, progress against that, and making sure that you have everybody engaged and bought into that. So you don't get halfway through the assignment and then think, oh, crikey, we're not on track to deliver. So I think just thinking about it as almost an espresso version of a normal role, and think about how you can, really kind of drive the momentum, because that is often obviously what is being looked for. I think the other thing is, think about, whilst you need to obviously influence, engage stakeholders, navigate politics to a certain extent, you're there for your expertise, you're there for your ability to make things happen. So, really focus on that and make sure, you're clear about what to deep dive into and where to maybe go, okay, other people are better placed to lead this, so that you say no to the right things and you focus your energy on delivering the change agenda.
I love that. espresso version of the 90-day plan. That will catch. I like that very much. I'm sure it doesn't always run smoothly, and these change and transformation projects require resilience amongst many other elements. How do you stay positive and resilient as you go through these processes?
Very good question. Combination of things. I think you're absolutely right. I find change and transformation very exciting, but it can also be, it can be tough and it can be challenging at times. Particularly, I do a lot of work on marketing operating model and organization design, in the context of business transformation, so there's often a people impact. I pride myself on being a very, a people person, and hopefully having, a culturally, sensitive approach to that. But, it can take its toll. So two things, I think. One, I have a great network that I can tap into of people that I've worked with and trusted through the years if I'm, kind of experiencing thorny or difficult issues. I think the other thing for me is I always try and press a reset button if I go from one assignment to another quite quickly. Organizations are very incredibly different. So I've gone before from working with a high energy, agile scale up where decisions can be made like that, few stakeholders, really fast pace of change, to working with, a more corporate, bigger organization with numerous stakeholders, complex politics, silos, where the change doesn't happen quickly, and that can be really frustrating, particularly when you're somebody who wants to make things happen, which I am. So I have to remind myself to kind of do that little reset thing, and I have a bit of a 10-minute hack sometimes at work if I'm finding myself, but being on a tough meeting, this is when I'm working from home, and whether it's playing a song for a few minutes, or getting a breath of fresh air and going for a walk, or a bit of yoga or something like that. For me, it's making sure I mentally kind of take a little bit of time, a little hack in the day if necessary, if things are not necessarily going to plan.
No, I think that's really, really good advice. Whatever you do certainly works. Slightly different sort of angle now, because I'm always curious to ask our senior leaders what they think might be the priorities for the next year or two. And obviously in this case, I'm interested in, the senior CMOs, senior interim transformation leaders. Just wonder what your thoughts are.
Yeah, for me, there's three areas. I'd say the first one is, we're in challenging economic environment, and consumers are obviously very careful with any discretionary spend. So for me, brands have to really be clear on how they add value in consumers' lives, and it's not just about packaging that up into great communications. Obviously that's important. For me, brands are now all about the experience. So it's really about, okay, are we delivering that across, an end-to-end customer journey in the most seamless way? So, be clear what you stand for, how you add value, deliver it across the journey. That would be my first thing. I think the second area, which, is a conversation in its own right, is how marketing really delivers, efficiently and effectively. And it's about using data, insight, technology in the right way. And obviously this is something every, marketing organization and business is wrestling with at the moment, whether it be how you use generative AI, whether it be what's your, the right MarTech stack, first party data strategy, given, cookieless future, etc. So I think it's really important to be clear on the return from marketing and to be utilising the toolbox that's now available to really maximise that. And I'd say having more of an appetite for test and learn, really critical, because, in order to work out what that optimum model is, you've got to be able to be prepared to fail a bit, I think, and run more tests. And then I think the last area is really around capability. So again, linked to 1 and 2, marketing covers so many disciplines today. We all know, we all read about the fragmentation of the marketing and the CMO role. For me, building the right team with the right mix of capabilities across both generalists, like, brand, marketing planning, etc., right through to the specialists, whether it be content storytellers or data experts, getting that mix right in the context of your business operating model is crucial. And I would add into that having the right agency partners as well and the right ways of working. If you've got that as a real engine, then I think that will allow you to punch above your weight in terms of competing. So those would be my 3 things.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, what drives you to succeed in your career? It's been an astonishing career. You're still getting these incredibly exciting roles. What's the driving force?
I like making an impact, both on businesses and on people. So, I want the people I work with to want to work with me again, or want to work for me, or want to be mentored by me, or, want to recommend me. So that's always really important. I think in terms of the business impact, I'm a bit of a storyteller. I could probably write a book of all the, the stories of my career. And I like to have both positive stories, but also, stories that are learning, because, we all know that, not everything goes right all the time. And it's important to, kind of recognize that as well. So I think, having learning experiences, growing, as a leader and as a CMO, really important to me, and delivering the results, and importantly broadening my network. I think everywhere I've worked, I'm carrying a group of people with me from that, which I love, and it kind of makes me feel that I'm continually, after 30 odd years, still learning and still growing in my role.
Excellent. You should write that book. The market is definitely in your level, moving more towards the interim market. And I think there's a lot of people who would value, 1, your interesting stories, and 2, your guidance. So
thank you.
Yeah, I think that could be a good project for you. Julie, thank you. Really nice to catch up. Some fabulous answers. I think everyone will love listening to that.
Thanks, Suzie. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure.